Humans have 3 bodies, really 3 bodies. Like in the movie Gentlemen of Fortune, there was one professor. They hit him on the head when they were by the river. They tied up another one at the cottage, and a third one came and started fighting with the first one. 2 professors fighting each other, and the third one, who is tied up at the cottage, says, "The more professors we turn in, the better." So we have 3 bodies. People don't understand what it means to have 3 bodies. I am the soul, a little spark, but some think I am not small, I am big. No one wants to be small. But in reality, the soul has a spiritual body. A spark is like an engine, like a car engine. So is the soul. It's the engine of life energy. It constantly generates the desire to live. Hence this desire to live. Desire for happiness and knowledge come from the soul. It's like a spark, like the sun with all these nuclear processes and constant explosions happening there, and it shines. So inside a person there is this constant energetic force, the desire to live, the desire for knowledge, the desire for happiness, 3 desires. From this zone, where the soul is located, these desires are constantly produced. Generally, these desires to live normally, to truly live fully, it means for the soul to be in touch with the spiritual time. Because the soul itself draws energy from spiritual time, because in spiritual time there is increasing happiness, the soul becomes happier and happier with each second, and so on indefinitely. There is the physical body and the subtle energy body. There is subtle matter and there is physical matter. Therefore, there's subtle energy body and the physical material body. They are in contact with material time, and material time always reduces energy. It fades. Everything material fades. The sun fades, the solar system fades, the universe fades. Everything fades here in this world. When the universe comes to the end of its existence, it retracts back into the body of the Lord. This is the unmanifest state. Then it expands, comes out of the Lord's body and expands, then shrinks, then again enters into the body of the Lord. That's how the Lord breathes. Everything here happens in cycles. Day replaces night. Winter is followed by spring, and so on. Everything is cyclic. Even an atom spins. Its electrons move. The lifespan of an atom reduces. All life in this world is cyclical. And so is human life. It goes through the cycle of birth and death. That's how a person lives in the material world. Here everything is cyclical. Why cyclical? Because the soul by its nature compels matter to live. But for a while, activity increases in the physical body and the soul, and then fades, because matter tends toward death and overpowers the soul. Life intensifies until the age of 33, then gradually begins to fade. But in the spiritual world, there is always increasing happiness, eternal life, no aging processes, no cycles. In the spiritual world, souls live depending on their desire for a specific relationship with God. It's the key. For example, if a soul wants to be parents to God, it remains in an adult state. If a soul wants to be a child to God, then it always remains in a child state. If a soul wants to be a lover to God, then it stays in a youthful state. Depending on what role it wants to play for God, it remains in that state in the spiritual world. When the soul is sated with that state, it can then move to another and change accordingly. The spiritual body changes its form depending on the desire. In the material world, this does not depend on our desires. We just pass through all these stages. First childhood, then youth, then maturity, then old age. We pass through these stages due to the influence of material time. In the spiritual world, the soul is free. It is not subject to these cycles. It lives depending on what it desires. If it desires conjugal love, then it has an eternally youthful body. If it wants to be a child and for God to act as a parent, then it has a child's body. If it wants to be God's mother, then it has an adult body. If it wants to be a sage, then it gets an even more mature body. That's how the soul lives in the spiritual world. In the material world, there are contradictions between the spiritual existence and the material existence of the soul. Because, for instance, in our hearts, we desire ever-increasing happiness. We believe that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. Better than yesterday, better than yesterday. Tomorrow will be better than yesterday. We are sure of this. It's the spiritual component of our lives. Ultimately, the soul will be fine. When we reach the spiritual world, everything will be fine. When it will happen, we don't know. I was once at the Wailing Wall, at the wall of the Jewish temple, which turns out to be very powerful, even the wall itself, because their people perform a lot of spiritual practice. When I leaned my forehead against it, I began to feel like a soul. I started to feel like a soul more intensely than usual. When you feel your spiritual nature more, you can also feel the material nature better. And I wanted to understand how long I've been here, in this world. I started to look at my past lives. I didn't explore the details. I just wanted to understand how many lives I have lived. And of course, it was impossible to count, because I began to look deeply in the past. God hides nothing. He shows. And I saw it. A day of Brahma lasts for 4 billion years, and we are living somewhere in the middle of this day. And I saw how half of the day of Brahma ended. That means I have been living here in this world for 2 billion years. Then another 4 billion years go by in an unmanifest state. It's the night of Brahma, and I've lived through that too. And in that period, I mostly lived in animal bodies. I had insect bodies at first, then animal bodies, and I had few human forms of life. I even managed to live in heaven on higher planets. Then I offended a holy person there, and back to earth I went. These are the last 15 lives. Before that, it was all fun. I saw 60 previous lives, and I told God, please, show me this in detail. And He showed me that my body was elongated. Is that me, Dr. Torsunov? But the body was elongated, and I was chewing something and couldn't taste it. But there was just a feeling that it was alive, and I liked that it was alive. I enjoyed chewing it. And I realized that I was in a crocodile's body. I thought, wow, how on earth did I get there? And I looked further. 2 billion years, then 4 billion years. That's already 6. Then the next day of Brahma. And all of the next day of Brahma, I was in plant forms of life. Trees, plants. The less energy, the smaller the form of life. So it started with trees, then it got smaller, smaller, smaller. Then some sort of amoebas at the end, something like that. And before that, again, 4 billion years of unmanifest state. And then for about another 2 billion years, I also lived in this universe, but in higher forms of life. That means I fell and kept falling for a very long time. I was falling from the spiritual world for several billion years. It doesn't happen in 5 seconds, as it turns out. So I fell. Now let's count. 2 plus 4 makes 6. Plus another 4, that's 10. Plus another 4, 14. Plus another 2. That's about 16 billion years since I've been living here in this material world. And you say, soon we'll be back to the spiritual world. It may be soon, but one must realistically understand that it is not easy, and it has to be earned. So, when we get into the human form, there are 2 possibilities. Some people, having obtained human form, degrade. They fall further down. Others have gotten enough, and they start wondering how to get out of here. They already want to go back. It's very important to look at people. Many people simply have no interest in spiritual knowledge. This means that they are still rolling downhill. These people differ greatly from one another. Some are plummeting downwards while others are ascending. These are both human forms of life, but the mood, the desire to forget it all, is so strong. And you can't force some people to engage in spiritual practices to pray to God. Whatever you do, it's still useless. That means they don't want to. They want to be plants, they want to be microbes, they have their own program. Of course, when a person has gone through all these evolutions, these stages, and one is tired and wants to go back home to the spiritual world, then maybe it will not take too long, a few dozen more lifetimes. Or maybe just one, who knows? It varies from person to person. So of course, nothing here is simple. We have 3 bodies. There is a spiritual body. It operates fully only in the spiritual world. And why? Because the soul in the spiritual world wants to serve. It wants to surrender itself. This desire to surrender oneself is the action of the soul. It's the activity or the state of the soul. But here, in the material world, the soul doesn't want to surrender itself to anyone. It wants to live for itself. And this desire to live for oneself, this is called sleep. When a person gets out of bed, one does something, as if surrendering oneself, or one goes to bed to sleep. For the soul, when it is in the material world, it's as if it has gone to bed to sleep. It doesn't want to do anything for anyone. But when the soul wants to do something for someone, it awakens. This awakening of the soul is different from the awakening of a person, but it is similar to the awakening of a child. When a small child wakes up, one cries, "Mama." Similarly, when the soul awakens in the material world, It feels God and cries. It says, I can't do without you anymore. How much longer? It awakens and cries. It feels God. If you've ever felt the Lord in a dream and started crying for Him, it means your soul is beginning to awaken. That's a good state. You can remember this state and then recall it in prayer. And that's very cool. You can feel yourself as a soul much faster if you specifically feel this cry of the soul for God. Because just the cry of a child here won't help, of course. So the spiritual body of the soul doesn't function here. It just sleeps. But the subtle energy body and the physical body are active. The subtle energy body operates on an invisible level. It actually lives more intensely than the physical body. Because all our experiences, thoughts, emotions are in the subtle energy body. The physical body only makes contact with this world, eating, engaging in sex, and so on. Essentially, the physical body provides the subtle energy body with sustenance for life. That means the subtle energy body lives in this world through the physical body, but our life itself unfolds in the subtle energy body. We feel ourselves to be human. This is a subtle energy sensation, not a physical one. But some fools think they are the physical body, and they try to realize themselves in this aspect. They inflate their lips, their breasts, get tattoos on their physical body. They try to make something extraordinary out of the physical body and consider themselves to be the body. People consider themselves to be the physical body. This, of course, is a very strange form of life in the human body, because actually the person has confused things. They were supposed to be born in an animal body, but somehow ended up in a human one. Perhaps a rogue mutation gene got in, maybe a malevolent mutant, and one was born a malevolent mutant. Actually, one who has a human body should feel themselves at least as a subtle energy body. If a person considers themselves the physical body, it means they've gone a bit off track. Human form confuses them. It's difficult for them to live in human form because they can't eat properly, can't have sex properly. That means they want to fully enjoy the physical body, but it's impossible in the human form of life. For example, a bear can eat a lot and sleep for half a year without any issues, but a human being cannot. A cow eats constantly, never stops eating, even chews in its sleep. A pig has great capacity to enjoy food. It smacks its lips with its eyes closed in happiness. Even if it's eating waste, it just loves to eat. You may want to run like a gnu antelope. It runs, almost flying through the air. It runs beautifully. You could fly as a bird, swim as a fish. All the pleasures can be experienced in animal bodies. But in a human body, one can experience nothing of that kind. You can't fly properly, can't swim properly, can't eat well, nothing good at all. The only thing to do is to develop, to work on yourself, to understand this world. So, to better understand what the physical body is, what the subtle energy body is, let's study what the Vedas describe as the building blocks of the universe. Our modern scientists are very confident that they have grasped the very foundation of the universe. They study some quasitrons and so forth. In reality, the Vedas describe everything. They say there are 8 primary initial elements of creation. Here's the most basic building block of creation. There's nothing more subtle than this in this world. And subtle energy matter is the foundation of creation. Subtle energy matter is not even wave-like. It's finer than that. Scientists know that besides physical matter, there are waves and wave matter. And quantum physics says everything is movement, everything is wave matter, even tiny particles are still waves, everything is made of waves, and still, it is not complete knowledge. Because even wave matter or movement is the force that makes all this matter move, and these forces that make all this happen are the primary elements. There are 5 primary elements that cause both subtle and physical matter to live, the 5 primary elements of the universe. The very first primary element is called the primary element of ether. It's a substance that creates space. Without the primary element of ether, there is no space. It can create different kinds of spaces. For example, we have a physical body and a subtle energy body. These are different spaces. The subtle energy body is within the physical body, like water is in a glass. There may be many stones in a glass. It's like the physical body, but you can still pour water into it because it's finer. Similarly, the subtle energy body has its own spaces, and there are even more types of spaces in the subtle energy body than in the physical body. Even within the physical body, there are different spaces. But in the subtle energy body, it's arranged quite differently. There is a space for intelligence, a space for the mind, and there is also a sense of self-worth, which has its own space. All this is created by the first element, ether. And when we talk about the mind, it's like the subtle framework of a person. and it also has different dimensions. It's all very complex overall, but the essence is that without the primary element of ether, even this universe wouldn't exist. It simply wouldn't be there because it would just be a black hole. Black holes are also created from the primary element of ether. The primary element of ether becomes very dense, and thus even a large universe turns into a point when it enters a black hole. These are different types of space, and the primary element of ether can be very dense or less dense. Just like people can be very dense, some people sink, while others float. Sometimes when people float, they are compared to something. I understand why it's not good to be friends with you, but that's just a joke. The primary element of ether is the very first element in the universe. Next comes the primary element of air. The primary element of air creates all kinds of movement. While the universe only had the primary element of ether, there was no movement at all. By the way, the fact that all scriptures mention that God created this material world in 7 days and 7 nights refers to the 7 days and nights of Brahma. To understand it, you need to calculate how many billions of years it took to create the material world. 1 day of Brahma is 4 billion years, 1 night is another 4. So 4 times 4, that's how many billion years it took to create the universe, so that you know what day and night mean. First, the primary element of ether was created. There was no movement in the universe. There was nothing at all, just space. Then the primary element of air was created, and movement began in the universe. It enables movement. For example, when a person breathes, it's the primary element of air that makes the substances we breathe move. Even when we think, it's due to the primary element of air. Without it, thinking is impossible, breathing is impossible, atoms stop, electrons stop moving, everything stops. Without the primary element of air, nothing would move. Everything would come to a halt. It's not like a traffic jam. Nothing would move, everything would freeze. The next primary element is fire. The primary element of fire is needed for transformation. All kinds of changes that exist. For example, scientists have learned to split atoms and change the periodic table, transform one atom into another atom. All these transformations require the primary element of fire. Without the primary element of fire, nothing would transform in our bodies. And nothing in the universe would transform. When we are thinking, for example, one thought is followed by another, and we suddenly understand, oh, that's what it's all about. This understanding also happens with the help of the primary element of fire. The primary element of fire transforms everything, changes everything. Next after fire comes the primary element of water. The primary element of water binds everything together. Before it existed, nothing was connected in the universe. Everything was separate. As soon as it appeared, the possibility of connection emerged. For example, the human body is 80% water. To bind everything together, to make everything move, water is needed. Water flows inside the vessels, inside the nerve tissue. Everywhere there is water. Water enabled movement and connection. Everything in the universe became connected. And the last primary element is earth. The primary element of earth creates structure. There is a subtle structure. Even the subtle energy body is woven from the primary element of earth. Because without it, there would be no structure at all. The physical body is also made from the primary element of earth. Without the primary element of earth, there would be no structures at all. So the 5 primary elements created the universe. Planets, movements, stars, all of this appeared thanks to the 5 primary elements, the building blocks of creation. But for living beings to exist in this universe, 3 more primary elements were needed. The first primary element is a completely different kind of matter. It is the matter that creates the subtle energy space, the space for the life of living beings. Where there is no subtle energy space, there is no life. How to determine that there is life? It is determined by the subtle energy space. For example, some say, there is no soul in a tree, but the tree is alive. Alive means there is a subtle energy space in it. If there is a subtle energy space, then there is a soul, because subtle energy space does not exist without a soul. So this subtle energy body is intended to connect matter with the soul. It exists for no other reason. Therefore, there is a soul in a microbe in a tree. Everywhere there is a soul where there are signs of life. The soul has a spiritual body, and this spiritual body is copied by the primary element of the mind. It is called manas in Sanskrit. This primary element of the mind creates the basis for life, the subtle framework. This framework is called the subtle energy body. or the body of desires, as it's sometimes referred to, because desires determine the structure of this body. Whatever desires there are, they all get fulfilled. The soul wants our desires to be fulfilled in this world. Who fulfills desires? God fulfills them. Why does He exist in this world? Why was the whole universe created? Because of our desires. What else would He do here? He is fine in the spiritual world. Why was the material universe created? Because souls decided to live for themselves. In the spiritual world, you can't live for yourself. So God created material universes so that souls could live. There are as many material universes as there are different forms of life. For example, if we see another universe, we won't understand what's happening there because they live differently. The soul has sleep and wakefulness. For some reason, the soul gets tired of being awake and decides to sleep. In the spiritual world, it freezes, stops functioning, it freezes. And there it lasts literally a second. But here it takes billions of years, and then it awakens. Oh man. So there is a subtle energy body, and within it there's manas. Manas, or the mind. The subtle body of the mind has its own structure. It is essentially meant for desires. What kinds of desires are there? For example, if the soul wants to forget everything, I'm tired of everything, then the soul receives the body of a tree. The subtle energy body also has the same framework, but this form of life is called dreamless sleep. In the material form, it manifests as a tree. The subtle energy body is the same. It has manas, intelligence, buddhi, and ahankara, false ego. The subtle energy body is the same, but the physical body becomes completely different. The physical body takes the form of a plant. Because it is in the form of a plant that the soul lives in a state of dreamless sleep, meaning it is completely unaware of itself. If a living being is in a state of dream with dreams, then it's an animal body. Everything functions there except for the intelligence. The functions of intelligence are not active in an animal body. Consciousness awakens in the human form of life, where intelligence is activated. If we talk about more advanced forms of life, where you can fly and transform into whatever you want, as we see in fairy tales, then it's more advanced forms of life. For a more advanced form of life, a person needs to master the subtle energy body better, because the body of an angel is not such a dense matter. Angels do not live on earth. That means in a higher world, matter becomes less dense and easier to handle. It offers more possibilities. You can fly, transform into anyone you want, and so on. There are more opportunities on the heavenly planets. On the other hand, on the hellish planets, they have a body of suffering. There's a special body for living in hell. It's even worse there. The soul has even fewer opportunities, very limited possibilities. It's like comparing an American passport with a Russian one. With an American passport, you can fly around the world without a visa. With a Russian passport, you can barely go anywhere. In hell, there are even fewer possibilities, not like in Russia. I'm joking. Actually, Russia covers half the earth. You can travel everywhere without leaving the country. And you can also travel to half the earth. China covers another half of the earth. You can travel to Africa, another half of the earth, to South America. And where you can't go with a Russian passport is just a small part of Europe, a tiny piece of the earth, and a little bit of America and Canada. That's just North America, but you can go to all the other countries with a Russian passport. Everything's fine. There are no issues with that. It's not so bad after all. However, in hell, opportunities are extremely limited. You can't move, you must remain in a cauldron and boil. This is true, it's not an allegory. Hell consists of various states of suffering based on one's deeds, and all these torments are experienced in the subtle energy body. In the human subtle energy body, or manas, there are two primary types of subtle energy channels. The first type is unusual and complex, known as nadi. Nadi are unique subtle energy channels that connect one person's subtle energy body to another. For instance, on a broader scale, all people are interconnected through their subtle energy body, forming a network that binds us together on this earth. This means we are linked by a subtle energy, extending beyond ourselves and interweaving like a net. These subtle energy connections make us worry about our close people and allow us to sense another person's suffering and pain. This is facilitated by the nadi, these subtle energy channels. Speaking of subtle energy channels, nadi are essential for the subtle energy body vitality. By the means of these channels, we think, dream, make decisions, and experience emotions. All these functions occur within the nadi. Much of a person's life is governed by these channels. Among them, there are three main subtle energy channels, corresponding to the three primary energies within a person. The most crucial energy is the energy of eternity, or prana. Running along the spine is a channel called sushumna, extending from the crown to the tailbone, through which prana flows. When a person thinks, I want to live, prana is activated in the sushumna, increasing its flow and spreading the energy of movement throughout the body based on this desire to live. For example, children, with their strong will to live, wake up joyful in the morning, while older individuals may feel more lethargic. This difference is due to a reduced desire to live at an older age. Although the soul always seeks life, as the body ages, prana flows less freely due to the obstacles in the physical body. Maintaining vitality requires more and more asceticism practices each year. As one ages, energizing the body becomes more challenging. Therefore, asceticism practices are necessary to sustain life. Without such practices, an elderly person's life becomes more sluggish and they gradually decline. If they do engage in these asceticism practices, then life flows normally. Although the body is no longer as comfortable, a long and happy life is still possible through asceticism practice. Thus, sushumna is the channel that supports our will to live. If someone experiences stress and loses the will to live, their feelings are influenced by their desire to engage in asceticism practices. This is true for both women and men. Women often focus on bodily pleasure, while men are more inclined to achieve success, therefore it's easier for them to push themselves. Women must understand that excessive relaxation results in reduced prana. Generally, women have less prana because their focus on enjoying the body does not encourage movement. Enjoying the body means relaxation and inactivity. It depletes prana, leaving women in a state of weakness due to a lack of prana. This is because the female body is designed for pleasure rather than discipline. Therefore, women naturally have less prana than men. However, if a woman challenges herself, prana can flow properly even in a female body. On the left side of a person flows the energy channel, Ida Nadi. The word nadi means subtle energy channels, so Ida Nadi, which runs on the left side, represents the flow of love energy. On the right side flows pingala nadi, which channels the energy of knowledge. There might be confusion here because the energy of knowledge is activated by the sun and purified by water. Conversely, the energy of love is activated by water and purified by the sun. Thus, the activation processes for these energies are reversed. So the sun is linked with pingala nadi, which activates knowledge energy. This energy is considered solar or masculine. Water energy is associated with femininity. The energy of happiness is activated by water. The energy of knowledge is activated by the sun. So the male nature, which is connected to the energy of knowledge, aligns with solar energy, and the female nature aligns with water energy. Consequently, men resemble the sun, characterized by strength and resilience, while women resemble water, embodying softness and gentleness. Women, in particular, have a stronger Ida Nadi, making their left side channel 3 times more active than the right. This creates an imbalance. With prana flowing through the sushumna, this imbalance means the left side channel is very active while the right side channel is 3 times weaker. Therefore, women receive solar energy 3 times weaker, while water energy flows 3 times stronger. As a result, women often feel cold and seek warmth, preferring sunny environments due to the lack of solar energy. The feminine nature craves sunlight, seeking masculine energy. In contrast, men often feel overheated due to an excess of solar energy and need to cool down, requiring more water and time spent in it. Women generally have a fear of water and prefer being in the sun. This reflects their nature. Examining this further, the pingala nadi, the energy channel, stimulates volitional functions in individuals. For example, men's willpower tends to be 3 times stronger than women's. This channel drives the desire to overcome challenges, endure, and conquer. Hence, pingala nadi is highly activated in men. Young boys, for instance, are often in constant motion, driven to explore and resist. They might act oppositely to what they are told. This behavior reflects male nature's inclination towards action and resistance. Conversely, female nature seeks harmony and relationships. While men are drawn towards societal achievements, women are more inclined towards nurturing relationships. Ida Nadi, the female energy channel, strongly influences traits such as love, tenderness, and harmony. It encourages kindness and a desire for relational connection. A young girl often seeks approval by showcasing her goodness, while a young boy displays his strength. These channels impart such tendencies through the body. As a result, women thrive in family life and relationships, while men feel fulfilled through work and activity. These dynamics are facilitated by Ida and Pingala nadi. Beyond these main channels, nadis also include finer channels, but they are less significant as the primary three replicate the energies of the soul. The soul has three primary energies: knowledge, eternity, and happiness. The central channel represents eternity, the right side signifies knowledge, and the left side corresponds to happiness. Therefore, women are associated with happiness, and men with knowledge. Everyone is born to live on this earth. Who has a stronger desire to live, men or women? The fundamental desire to live is universal, not gender-specific. Everyone wants to live. How individuals react to danger may differ. Men may confront threats while women might avoid them, but the will to live remains the same. Moving on to Shrotas. Shrotas are another type of subtle energy channels, distinct from nadis. They are not involved in our subtle energy functions, such as relationships, love, or thoughts. Nadi channels are meant for this. Shrotas are designed to envelop all the structures of the physical body. Shrotas connect the physical body to the subtle energy body. They are the connectors. Specifically, Shrotas create the blueprint of the organism. There's a blueprint in the subtle energy body. Does a small seed have life in it? No. A seed of an apple, pear, or wheat doesn't have life in itself, but it's designed in such a way that life can easily enter it. For example, when a seed interacts with water, it swells. And as it swells, a soul, along with the subtle energy body, immediately enters the seed and starts living in it, following the blueprint found in the Shrotas. Consider a tiny banyan seed. It contains the blueprint of a vast banyan tree that can grow into an entire forest. From one tree, from its roots, grows another tree, and another. Thus a vast forest can grow. I saw such a banyan tree in India, covering several hectares. It had spread so much that it formed an entire forest. This immense potential is embedded in a tiny seed, smaller than a millet. The true knowledge isn't in the seed itself, but in the subtle energy body that enters it along with the soul. From a banyan seed, only a banyan tree can grow. Compatibility is key. If the soul's karma aligns with a banyan tree, it will manifest accordingly. Thus, there is an element of predestination. Different trees and plants represent various desires for life. Even among trees, desires differ. The strength of karma and piety affects growth. Plants with less piety or energy might only grow into grass depending on their desire to live. Life enters trees and plants through seeds. A similar process occurs in human life. An egg cell, though alive, cannot sustain life on its own. It merely exists without a soul. The soul attaches to the sperm. When fertilization occurs, the egg gains the potential for life, and a tiny human begins to develop. Life starts with fertilization, activating the Shrotas. These mental functions initiate, and cells begin to multiply along the Shrotas. For example, the psychic neural tube in humans forms simultaneously in several locations. These cells expand across the body, demonstrating that development follows a comprehensive blueprint. This proves that the human body is created according to a blueprint. If you're connecting two pipes underground from different directions, you need a comprehensive vision to make them meet. In the human body, everything develops in different places, yet connects very synchronously because all development follows the Shrotas. Shrotas are like a 3D blueprint. It's a volumetric blueprint of the human body. Animals and even cockroaches have such a volumetric blueprint. If the Shrotas are disrupted, developmental anomalies occur. Ancient scholars were able to detect disruptions in the Shrotas of a fetus by examining the mother's pulse. They could even predict potential developmental anomalies in the child based on these pulse readings. Developmental anomalies refer to disruptions in the state of the Shrotas. This raises a question. Does the human subtle energy body possess a divine nature?
Divine.
Indeed, divine, which implies perfection. Thus, Shrotas are inherently designed to function correctly without anomalies. Restoration of Shrotas occurs through the energies of knowledge, happiness, and eternity. In this world, these three energies manifest as subtle forms. The energy of happiness is akin to the subtle energy of water. The energy of knowledge is similar to solar energy. And the energy of eternity corresponds to the subtle energy of air. When a mother engages in asceticism practices, an Ayurvedic doctor can determine which energy is lacking to activate the Shrotas. By performing the appropriate asceticism practices, any anomalies can be corrected, restoring balance within the body. Therefore, by the means of careful asceticism practices during pregnancy, a child can develop normally. Conditions like autism and cerebral palsy, which involve disruptions in the subtle energy body structure, can be healed through such asceticism practices. Ancient people appreciated asceticism practices and incorporated them into their religious practices. Religious texts in all traditions emphasize the necessity of pilgrimages, maintaining stationary position of the body during rituals, and fasting. These practices were integral to daily life, contributing to overall health and the well-being of children. Today we live incorrectly, which leads to an increase in illnesses. So we're discussing the subtle energy body. Within the subtle energy body, besides nadis and 2 types of Shrotas, there are energy transformers essential for various functions. First, different types of energies are needed for human life. Both lower and higher energies are necessary, and for this reason, chakras exist. Chakras function as energy transformers, converting different forms of energy. For instance, the highest chakra receives mukhya prana, the energy of the spiritual realm, which is pure and eternal. We absorb it when we want to live. We access this spiritual energy when we desire to live. It enters through the crown of the head. However, spiritual energy cannot function in the subtle energy body. It requires conversion to operate. Therefore, there is a chakra that transforms this spiritual energy into prana. Mukhya prana is converted into prana. The lower part of the body is influenced by the lower worlds. Human body is similar to the universe. The highest chakra is connected with higher planets, while the lowest chakra links to lower planets. All this operates dynamically. Chakras are part of the manas of the subtle energy body. The lowest chakra, called muladhara, is located at the base of the spine between the anus and genitals. It is energetically associated with Mars and pertains to the bodily concept of life. When self-awareness pervades the entire body, indicating a strong identification with the body, it suggests that the muladhara chakra is highly active. The lowest subtle energy chakra activates the downward movement of energy in the body. Generally speaking, there are 5 types of energy movements in a human body. Moving beyond chakras, let's discuss energy movement. The entry of energy into the human body is known as prana. Prana then divides into 4 streams. The first stream is prana itself, which further splits in 4 directions. The first stream, apana, represents a downward energy flow. This flow relaxes individuals, making them slow-witted, leading them to feel lethargic, unmotivated, and inclined to rest and enjoy life leisurely. In women, this apana flow is more active than in men. Consequently, women often experience a stronger desire to relax, lie down, and rest. Apana flow is always active. Why is this necessary? Because apana is also responsible for fetal development, reproductive functions. It governs sexual desire, all types of excretions. It's a very important energy stream in the body. A disruption in apana flow can lead to issues like constipation or, in women, difficulties with conceiving. If it's not functioning properly, a woman can't conceive a child. Excessive intellectual activity, which directs energy upward, can hinder relaxation and conception. Often when women quit their jobs and transition to a more relaxed, happy lifestyle, they find it easier to conceive, as this activates the apana flow. The second stream, udana, is an upward moving energy flow that fosters enthusiasm, willpower, activity, joy, and a drive to overcome obstacles. Udana is very active in intelligent beings. In animals, this flow is weak. This energy flow is responsible for rational existence. A strong udana enhances one's intelligence, wisdom, ability to understand and figure out things. This is the role of udana. This flow gives people joy and a good mood. Apana calms a person. For example, without apana, a person cannot sleep. Disruptions in the movement of apana affect sleep, relaxation, calmness, happiness, and bodily pleasure. All this is related to apana. And when a person is joyful and in a good mood, laughing, it's all thanks to udana. The next prana stream, samana, involves inward energy movement essential for digestion. This energy gathers at the body center, supporting efficient food digestion. Prana is also needed for digestion, and this flow is samana. Overall, samana is more active in men than in women. In men, both samana and udana are more active, the upward flow and the inward flow. That's why men have stronger digestion, whereas women's digestion is more selective. They don't have the same appetite as men. Men gorge, women nibble. The next energy flow is called vayana. Vayana is characterized by its outward movement. This outward flow supports the body's regulation and interaction with the environment. It tends to be stronger in women, allowing them to interact with their surroundings more effectively than men. For instance, while a woman may initially resist bathing in ice-cold water, if she tries it, she often shows greater resilience compared to men. His indicates that women are generally better equipped to handle environmental stressors due to their more adaptable vayana energy flow. However, women are less inclined towards rigorous asceticism practices. When they do undertake such practices, they often find them easier than men do. Thus, there are 5 prana energy streams in the body: apana, downward flow; udana, upward flow; vyana, outward flow connected with interaction with the world; and samana, inward flow. For example, if a person relocates south, a woman tends to adapt more quickly than a man. Similarly, if they move north, women again tend to adjust faster because their vyana flow functions more intensely, allowing them to adapt to new conditions more readily than men. Yet men tend to activate more quickly, developing enthusiasm faster, while women generally relax more readily. Of the 5 prana flows, apana is connected to the muladhara chakra, the lowest energy center. This chakra relates to parts of the body such as the legs, pelvic bones, and in general, the entire skeletal system is linked with the muladhara chakra because this chakra, being the lowest, governs the densest matter in the body. The entire skeletal system is also connected with it, but primarily the lower part of the body, the large intestine, is linked to this chakra, as well as the sexual organs. The planet Mars governs this chakra. Mars is a planet of coarse, masculine energy. Male sexual desire has a coarse nature. It is the nature of crude, harsh desire for exploitation and enjoyment. Such crude enjoyment is associated with the planet Mars, and it's also linked with the masculine principle. This planet also affects women, but not to the same extent. For example, the uterus is also somewhat connected to Mars. But male sexual organs are more connected to the planet Mars, and correspondingly this chakra, the Muladhara chakra, is linked to the lowest worlds. These are the lowest hellish planets. There are 3 things that lead a person to hell, hence it is believed that the Muladhara chakra is the gateway to hell. The gates to hell are opened by lust, greed, and anger. When a person constantly thinks about sex, they open their own gates to hell. When a person is constantly greedy, wanting everything for themselves, they open the gates to hell. And when a person is angry, hates someone, is furious, they open the gates to hell. Essentially, these gates open when the commandments of Moses are violated. For example, if a person engages in debauchery, they open the gates to hell. If a person steals, they open the gates to hell. If a person harms other people, shows aggression, kills someone, or commits rape, then they also open the gates to hell. The Muladhara chakra itself is harmless. It governs reproductive functions, allowing the body to rid itself of toxins. But it is also dangerous on a subtle energy level because it activates carnal desires in a person, or a desire that leads a person to the lower worlds, and essentially this chakra is connected with the lower worlds. From the lower worlds comes the desire for a body-centered life, lust and pleasure. These desires represent a bodily concept of life when a person considers themselves as merely a body and equates sex with love. This coarse physical conception of life breeds impudence, irritability, greed, and strong lust. This means the person has a primitive understanding of life, with the Muladhara chakra being very active. It's related to a hellish existence, a very aggressive life in harsh, aggressive energies. A police lieutenant colonel who led the training department at a police academy began attending my lectures. He suggested gathering officers for my lectures, saying, "We need to bring in our staff to hear your talks." When I arrived, there were 500 police officers, both men and women. The atmosphere was tense, with strict timekeeping and no visible reaction to my talk. I went to the stage. Someone gave an order to rise. They all stood up. Then they were ordered to sit. Everybody was gazing at me. "You have 40 minutes. The clock is ticking. Speak," they told me. I thought, what on earth am I doing here? During the lecture, I tried to tell jokes, but they showed no interest. I realized these people lived in different kinds of energies, so I couldn't catch their attention. I was thinking, what can I do? Then I had an idea. I said, the planet Mars is associated with one's willpower. Let's say a strong and iron-willed person can force someone. Suddenly they all tuned in. I saw they started thinking. I said, if a person's Mars functions improperly, the person commits violence against others, then their sexual functions suffer because Mars is also associated with sexual functions. They perked up and all started listening attentively because willpower and sexual functions were more interesting. I realized that people lived by these lower instincts. For them, it's about sex, forcing someone, overcoming something, committing violence, taking something by force. Such low bodily thinking is their life. I understood that their consciousness is on a completely different level. They live in a different world, a completely different life. As soon as I put on the uniform, I become more and more dim-witted. "Sergeant, our train has left. We don't know what to do. Please help us. Train, stop." Well, that's roughly the kind of thinking. And this thinking is related to the physical conception of life, linked with the muladhara chakra and a hellish existence. Consequently, people live in very coarse energies with violence, sex, lust, eating, sleeping, hard physical activity. Violence and harshness. They consider you as a mere matter. To them, you are just flesh, a piece of meat. They perceive you no differently. They are not interested in what you think. They are interested in how they can have sex with you. Nothing else matters. The next energy center is located around the navel, even lower, in the pubic area. This is called the Svadhisthana chakra. This center is associated with Venus. Venus is the lower female planet of the lower centers. Accordingly, sexual energy also moves there, but it has a feminine nature, and its activity is strongly associated with the feeling of comfort. Fear and fearlessness are also found there. Therefore, in women, the Svadhisthana chakra is more active than the muladhara chakra, so they have a strongly developed sense of fear, as well as a desire for comfort and relaxation. The desire to indulge their senses also stems from there. It's connected to lower worlds. But there are hellish worlds where living beings suffer, and there are hellish worlds where they indulge improperly, where technocratic civilizations are developed, where there is much desire for sex, where they drink and get high. This kind of bodily pleasure is the domain of the Svadhisthana chakra, or Venus. In general, Venus is the planet that governs demonic desires to receive pleasure, meaning it is a planet associated with the material desire to enjoy the body, comfort, coziness, sex, but this pleasure does not take a coarse form. It takes a more subtle and more noble form, so even the lower sexual desire, even the primitive sexual desire in a woman, still does not take a coarse form. Therefore, for a woman, sexual pleasure is not just about crude relations, but it requires a comfortable setting. Everything should be beautiful, pleasant, nice, cozy. So, in women, it operates differently because even the energy of sexual desire functions in a more subtle way in the female body. This chakra is also connected to the uterus. Male sexual desires are primarily associated with the sexual organs, but the Svadhisthana chakra governs glands rather than sexual organs, as well as appendages in women and sperm in men. The small intestine, the entire intestinal system, and kidneys are linked with the Svadhisthana chakra. And Venus itself, the energy of Venus, means simply enjoying life. A sense of pleasantness, good mood can also be associated with Venus, the feeling of comfort, coziness, enjoyment. These are all Venusian energies, so a woman has two types of beauty. There is Venusian beauty, which is a kind of bodily beauty. There is lunar beauty. Lunar beauty is more connected to the subtle energy body. It is associated with the higher worlds, meaning a woman has lunar beauty, which is associated with a sense of art, poetry, purity, cleanliness, bright beauty, fidelity, divinity. All of it is connected to the moon. And for instance, external cleanliness, softness, comfort, coziness, the softness of the body, the shapes of the female body, this is all Venusian energy. Accordingly, those people who are strongly attached to comfort, coziness, and consider it the main thing in life, who really love cats and delve into a cat consciousness and think, cats are the most important thing in life. Nothing is better than cats. By the way, dogs are associated with the lower center, the muladhara chakra, a coarser energy, whereas cats represent Venusian energy. There are hellish worlds where people suffer, and there are hellish worlds called the lower paradise. Lower paradise is for those who indulge in comfort and coziness and have nothing more in their life. They end up in the lower paradise. There they party, get high, get drunk. By the way, drunkenness is more associated with the Svadhisthana chakra. It is a feminine energy. Wine is a feminine energy. If a man has no relationship with women, he starts to drink wine. That means he needs this Venus energy, and he wants to enjoy it. Women are not prone to drinking because they already possess this energy. They live in this energy of enjoyment. Men lack it, so they start drinking to compensate the pleasure they get from women. When a man drinks, he becomes like a woman. He walks around enjoying himself, living in feminine energies, and it becomes repulsive to women that he resides in these energies. Rahu and Ketu are a completely different story. These two planets exist everywhere. They can be located in any energy centers. It's just a slightly different topic. These planets embody negativity. There are positive energies. There are 7 positive planets, including even Mars, but Rahu and Ketu are negative energies, and they can manifest anywhere, in the head or in the lower centers. Rahu signifies impudence, while Ketu signifies apathy, complete indifference. Ketu represents cunning, cruelty, coldness, and cold-bloodedness. Rahu represents nastiness, aggression. Mainly the territories of Russia, eastern and southern countries are under the influence of Rahu. Europe, Japan, even the Far East and the USA, are influenced by Ketu. There people are colder, more cynical. In Russia, swearing is more common. In Europe, almost no one swears. In Russia, people use more swearing than ordinary speech. In America, people also behave more culturally, but at the same time, they can easily betray each other. It's a kind of cold cunning. In Russia, they can kill you more easily. In those countries, they just send you away. They don't kill you. That's the cunning way of influence of Ketu. The next chakra is the solar plexus. This chakra is connected with life on the earth, not with lower planets, but with the earth. It's associated with the sun, with the solar system. Hence, this chakra is connected with the solar system. If the soul moves downwards their physical body together with the subtle energy body and exits through the muladhara chakra, usually at that time a person might defecate on themselves, a sign that they are headed to hell at the moment of death. Defecating means the soul exits through the anus, going to hell. If it exits through the svadhisthana chakra, then it goes to the higher hellish planets, and if it exits through the solar plexus, then the soul goes to earth, where it's reborn as a human, and that's the earthly level. And accordingly, the lower centers are associated with apana prana, but solar plexus, it's samana prana, which is connected to digestion. If a person's entire life is dedicated to eating, they are reborn at the earthly level. The desire for sex leads to the lower planets. If it's all about eating, then one is reborn on the middle planets. This subtle energy chakra is associated with overcoming earthly difficulties. The very desire to live, to survive, means to eat, and when it's strong, a person constantly arranges their life in this world. All of this is related to the solar plexus. One doesn't look for comfort, but just wants to have something: home, car, money, food, storing up supplies, setting everything up in their life. All of this is related to the solar plexus. All chakras follow one after another. The lowest is male, then female chakra, then male again. The solar plexus is a male chakra, and it's accordingly associated with a male planet, the sun. The sun is a male planet. Therefore, the desire to eat, to gorge, is more of a male desire. For women, however, eating is more about the Manipura chakra. Their desire to eat is more connected with the Manipura chakra. They either enjoy food from the heart, they revel in it, or the food must be healthy, meaning a woman eats either for benefit or for pleasure. Two options. Just gorging, she doesn't do that. Well, sometimes it happens when she's very hungry, but it's brief. She eats a little bit and then says, "Is there anything tasty?" Some people have crude physical strength. They're robust people. You may see it mainly in martial arts. They hit someone on the head. One feels nothing. This means the physical body is very strong. The skull bones and the skeleton are robust. The robust physical strength is related to the muladhara chakra, which is ruled by Mars. If a person is delicate, beautiful, that's the influence of svadhisthana chakra, and the manipura chakra makes a person healthy-looking, well-mannered, active, full of energy, maintaining their weight level. So, the manipura chakra is responsible for a person's mental activity. If one is full of energy running around, wanting things, that's the influence of manipura chakra, meaning one is an active, energetic person wanting to do things, to work. Svadhisthana chakra means lying on the couch, engaging in sex, and manipura chakra makes a person work.
And if not working, neither fish nor fowl, as they say.
We don't need the sun. Our party shines for us. We don't need food. Give us work. We don't need bread. Give us work. This is how Manipura chakra acts. Influence of the Manipura chakra means running somewhere to do something. The person is active, red-faced, doing something, wanting to eat. They work for 5, eat for 3. The next energy center is called anahata chakra, located in the area of the heart center. It's a female chakra associated with the planet Moon. It's connected with higher planets. This is the lower heaven. There's a lunar heaven where everyone revels. It's like a resort where everyone enjoys life. It's very beautiful. There are tall trees and large rivers. Nature is very beautiful. There are no microbes, so nothing spoils there. Trees are several kilometers high. They give huge fruits which fall, and they are very, very tasty. They fall and split open. A person can take one fruit that lasts for 2 weeks or more, and they eat and get only the energy of happiness from this fruit, and these fruits don't spoil. They last as long as they are kept. There, huge bees fly around the trees. They also have hives, and the honey flows down the trunks, forming streams and entire rivers of honey. And the juice of all these fruits also forms lakes of nectar. When people drink this nectar, they get high, they become happy. It's like a festive drink for them, but non-alcoholic, so they just become very happy when they drink this water. This is all lunar energy. When a person does good deeds with the aim to live happily, they access the lunar energy. When a person does good deeds to please God, they go the solar path. There are also heavenly planets there, but those who live there don't enjoy. Everyone serves God. The next chakras are responsible for this.
A little, yes.
So, moving upward. Accordingly, if a person in this life treated everyone kindly, did good deeds, and wanted happiness in life, then in this case, one goes the lunar path, and their soul, along with the subtle energy body, exits through the heart center. A kind-hearted person who loved all people, treated everyone well, reaches heaven via the lunar path, where life lasts about 400 years. On the highest heavenly planets, which are attained by the lunar path, everyone lives there for 400, 500 years. And when a person comes to earth, they remember that heavenly life, that pleasure. And when a person comes to earth from the heavenly planets, they have a very refined perception of the world, and they can still feel the heavenly energies. So, basically, people feel heaven in this life if they came from there, and they are more sensitive, more gracious. They understand art and poetry well. They perceive the world more deeply, more subtly, completely differently than we do. In songs, you can feel the longing for heaven, a distinct sensation that I want to go there, I feel bad here. These are details of heavenly happiness. The next energy center is called Vishuddha chakra. It is located in the area of the thyroid gland associated with the planet Mercury, and it is responsible for forming a person's emotions. For the emotional perception of the world, it is associated with speech and with a person's intuition. And there acts Udana prana, meaning from this center the energy starts moving upwards. This is Udana. If we talk about the moon here in the heart center, then it is associated with the activity of anahata chakra and with the activity of Vyana prana. This is a female chakra, and Vyana prana distributes the energy throughout the body. This is a female chakra, but the upper chakras are not associated with gender at all. The Vishuddha chakra is ruled by Mercury. Mercury means logical thinking. Very reasonable people, scientists. They study physical matter and try to understand how this world is arranged. But they don't have a deep understanding of the world, of its divine structure. They are atheists. This is called the Mercurian logical mind, which is based on logic and on experiment. This is material intelligence given by Mercury. It comes from there. Accordingly, people with strong Mercury possess strong speech, logic, reasoning, the ability to understand everything, to study. This center is associated with emotions, emotional perception of the world for women. The throat center in men is associated with speech. Women also love to talk, to express emotions. Men may also have this center developed. It can be developed in both women and men. It's not gender specific. It's not that only women like to chat and men have logical thoughts, talking and reasoning about something. Women more often describe what's happening. One person behaves this way, that one behaves that way, and imagine this one behaves that way. This is feminine thinking. It describes everything. And men tend to reason more logically. How does this energy center work? Sometimes it functions incorrectly. That means people begin to describe something not very good and create problems for everyone around. But this is still the work of the throat center. Nowadays, there are other rumors that soon all the bees will die, and when they do, the end of the world will begin. And this is somehow connected with 5G internet. Such rumors are going around. The Vishuddha chakra is an emotional world perception energy center. And accordingly, if this center works purely, then it leads to the planets of the sages and the scientists. These planets are higher. They are higher than the lunar heaven. On these planets, everyone engages in asceticism practice. They control their emotions and study the wisdom of life. The Vishuddha chakra is associated with the managers of this universe, the demigods, who are responsible for the planets, the activity of planets, for managing the universe. In every planetary system, there's a star. Every planetary system has its own Saturn, its own Venus, and in the universe there's only one manager who controls all the Saturns, named Shani Dev. There's one manager who controls all the suns. He's called Surya Dev. There's one sun in the entire universe, and it's very big. If I look at the sun right now, it seems very small. But on a subtle level, it's bigger. It's somewhere out there, unclear where it's located in the universe, but it's still visible. It is gigantic in size. We see the moon very small. But the moon is very large. Moon is even bigger than the sun on a subtle level. And that's the lunar heaven. It's a huge planet. It's visible on a subtle level. These planets are controlled by divine beings. In the Vedas, they are called demigods. All moons in the entire universe are managed by Chandra, all Saturns by Shani, all suns by Surya Dev, all Venuses by Shukracharya, all Mercuries are governed by Budh, an angel. Each planet has its own angel, but they are located not only in our solar system, they are found in all systems. And you should understand, this Shani does not live on our Saturn, he lives on the higher planets. So next chakra, the ajna chakra, is located in the forehead. It is associated with the activity of the planet Saturn. It governs human thinking, memory, reasoning, volition, and brain function. And it is energetically connected to the highest planets of the material world. For instance, there's the North Star, considered one of the highest planets of the material world. It's huge. Though it appears nearby, in reality, it's very far away. And there live the Saptarishi, the 7 primary sages of this world. From this planet, all knowledge is disseminated throughout the universe. All the discoveries that occur come from them, from these sages. They enable development in all fields, nuclear energy, space travel. All this knowledge comes from this planet of knowledge. And there live the most exalted living beings in the material world, more elevated than angels. They are very holy and exalted. The messiahs and the prophets come from this planet. Prophets who make predictions. The holy scriptures which give us knowledge about God are also from there. And the highest here, the sahasrara chakra, is located at the crown. It is associated with the planet Jupiter. It's connected to all who engage in spiritual practice and self-improvement. To those who understands the activity of the mind, lives by conscience, comprehending the absolute truth. All this is associated with the sahasrara chakra. Besides these 7 main chakras, there are also 7 secondary ones. I will not describe them. Besides these chakras, there are also energy centers that coincide with some chakra zones, but they play a completely different role. These energy centers are connected with the activity of intelligence, and there are only 3 of them. They coincide with these 3 energies. For instance, we have prana. Sushumna nadi is associated with prana. Ida nadi is linked with the energy of happiness, and pingala is linked with the energy of knowledge. Similarly, there are 3 centers of intelligence which are also connected to these 3 energies. Intelligence is a more subtle energy than the energy of the mind, which is intended for living. Manas is meant for living. Intelligence is not for living, it is for comprehending the truth. And intelligence is woven from a person's experience. And a person has 3 centers of intelligence. All of them are active, more active than in animals. In animals, all centers of intelligence depend on the mind, but in humans, the mind depends on intelligence. So intelligence makes the human mind act. This is called rational existence. The highest center of intelligence is in the forehead area, and it is connected with the energy of knowledge, meaning everything related to the comprehension of the world and the ability to realize, understand, subject oneself to the power of knowledge is located in the forehead area. In the heart area is the center of intelligence associated with the understanding of happiness, and this feeling of spiritual happiness, the highest spiritual bliss, samadhi for yogis, all this is connected with this center of intelligence. And the 3rd center of intelligence is associated with the energy of eternity. It is located in the groin area and gives a person an understanding of eternal life. It gives to a person courage, fearlessness, the ability to renounce, detachment, the ability to not be attached to anything. Ability to perform asceticism practices also comes from the lower center. The ability to love all living beings, all people, comes from the heart center. And the ability to comprehend the universe, the higher worlds, comes from the center of intelligence associated with knowledge. And these centers of intelligence are related to comprehending the highest truth and the purpose of human life. For instance, activity according to one's nature is impossible without using intelligence. When a person experiences happiness from activity and is ready to dedicate their entire life to work, such activity is always associated with selflessness. And the function of selflessness only acts through intelligence. It does not act through the mind. There are 4 types of human purpose. They are associated with these 3 centers of intelligence. The highest purpose does not change during a person's life, by the way. The highest purpose is when a person believes that knowledge will save the world, and their upper center of intelligence is the most active. Such people usually become scientists, priests, doctors, teachers, coaches, well, all those who give people knowledge and study all their lives as well. The 2nd center of intelligence is associated with happiness. It is the most active. And the 3rd center has the lowest activity. Like 3 traffic lights, the first one is on, the second one is half on, the last one is off at all. Then the person believes that the proper arrangement of people's lives will save the world. One wants people to be happy. One does not want knowledge. One wants happiness for people, and one does it through knowledge. This second type of people are called rulers, those who govern. Their goal is to organize the proper life on earth. The third type of people who believe that the main thing is for people to be happy. They think that not knowledge will save the world, but material well-being will save the world. They have this center in first place and the lower center in second place. Such people are businessmen. They try to provide everyone with food, products, and material comforts. When only the lowest energy center is active while the other two remain dormant, it indicates that a person is still undeveloped. In reality, there are three primary types of leaders in society: scientists, rulers, and businessmen. Others can become leaders as well, provided they continue to develop. Individuals who remain undeveloped have their lower center activated. They focus on learning to love and enjoy their work, but don't necessarily contribute to others. Their primary goal is personal satisfaction through labor. Such individuals seek a job they love without taking on responsibilities for others. In contrast, those in the first three categories assume responsibility for the well-being of others. Yesterday, we discussed the three subtle energy bodies: the soul with the spiritual body, the psychophysical body, also known as the subtle energy body, and the physical body. We explored the subtle energy body, which includes manas, the psychophysical framework of a person. This framework contains nadis, or energy channels, with three primary ones: sushumna, ida, and pingala nadis. We also covered the chakras within the subtle energy body that transform energy. Additionally, we discussed Shrotas, the energy channels responsible for connection with all the body's organs. The subtle energy body encompasses intelligence, which is active only in humans and higher beings. In animals, intelligence is subordinate to the mind and remains inactive, while in humans, it is distinct from the mind and it's connected to the soul. Intelligence is a mental structure that reveals external aspects of a person. When I pray, I feel a profound sense of holiness in my intelligence, as if I am experiencing the presence of God. At the same time, I observe my soul with my intelligence and see that it is tainted and dim, with only a faint light shining through. I can purify the soul with my intelligence through prayer. Generally, people follow this process. As one develops spiritually, they first purify their intelligence, making it clear, and then influence the soul through spiritual intelligence. The benefit of human life is our ability to cleanse our intelligence through the remembrance of God. Intelligence is purified through sound. Listening to the voice of a holy person and praying along with them helps to gradually purify your intelligence. You can deeply feel holiness or God's grace in it. Afterward, you can offer heartfelt prayers. Align your heart with the sound and use your pure intelligence to cleanse the heart. The heart, or soul, is purified only through devotion. If a person genuinely desires to dedicate their life to God, these sincere thoughts awaken and activate the soul. When a person with pure intelligence channels the spiritual sound of their senior to their heart, dedicating their life to God, the soul begins to awaken and it becomes purified. Thus, through pure intelligence, one can cleanse their entire being in prayer. Beyond intelligence, there is also a sense of personal dignity. Personal dignity, or egoism, has two variations. Spiritual dignity is essentially a person's faith. When one believes, they do it through their sense of dignity. Spiritual personal dignity represents the natural state of the soul. Believing in God and identifying with that belief provides a sense of belonging and strength. When the soul feels its connection to God, it experiences its fullest power. When the soul relies on God, it resembles a child standing next to their father, feeling brave and confident. One becomes bold, and one can bully anyone, even older boys sticking out their tongue. When a child holds their dad's leg, shows their tongue to everyone, and feels brave, their dignity relies on something. The child feels very good and confident. The soul's dignity cannot be solely based on itself. It depends on either false self-perceptions or on God. A person's dignity is also influenced by their piety. The more pious a person is, the stronger their sense of dignity becomes. That is called pride. When someone relies on their piety and views themselves as superior, it is known as pride. Pride represents a misdirected sense of dignity, built on a false foundation. When a woman relies on her husband, it is a shaky foundation. When a man relies on a woman, it creates an even more shaky foundation. Often a man relies on himself. He relies on his piety and shows off his toughness. A person's beauty depends on the functioning of their sense of personal dignity. A woman who relies on her sense of dignity becomes beautiful. If she lacks this sense of dignity, she becomes unattractive. When a woman looks in the mirror and thinks, "Wow, I am so beautiful," she becomes beautiful. Her awareness of her beauty is mirrored by others. If she does not recognize her beauty, others won't either. To feel beautiful, A woman often applies makeup, dresses up, and styles her hair. Then she realizes she's very beautiful. This is a woman's dignity because it is important for her to be beautiful. If she feels unattractive, she feels demeaned. When she is unattractive, she feels demeaned. For a woman, her beauty is her strength, her ability to see her beauty and take care of it. That is her power, her might, as well as her pride. The more beautiful a woman is, and the more she recognizes this beauty, the more she imposes expectations on the man next to her, demanding his acknowledgement. She conveys that being with her requires effort and appreciation, reflecting her sense of dignity. When both men and women rely on faith or proper human dignity, their perspectives shift. The woman begins to feel her connection to God and her dependence on Him. The feminine nature is naturally inclined toward devotion, although it can be challenging for a woman to embody this due to her body's tendency towards relaxation rather than asceticism practices. When a woman connects with divine purity, she can deeply sense holiness. This sense of purity allows her to devote herself entirely to God, embracing that purity to fully commit herself. For women, devotion is experienced through love. When she feels this purity, she loves it, and she begins to believe in this purity. This faith enables her to devote herself by relying on God with her sense of dignity. When she places her trust in God with her dignity, she feels a profound sense of protection, much greater than relying on her beauty or having a husband. This reliance brings complete psychological freedom, as only a truly free person can genuinely love others. For example, a free woman can take care of her husband with sincerity and purity, without concern for reciprocity or feeling unappreciated. Similarly, for a man, when his dignity relies on God, his dignity gets stronger, and it strengthens his sense of unity with Him. Devotion for a man involves the courageous commitment of his life to God. That's what devotion means for a man. For women, devotion manifests as a pure, loving dependency. For men, it is the desire to dedicate their life to God and to experience a profound sense of unity and strength, the ability to be strong. However, once the soul is purified and the dignity merges with its true nature, the distinction between men and women fades. The soul simply becomes aware of itself, of its purity, and lives in reliance on God, believing in God. This state of reliance on God shapes how dignity functions in the world, allowing one to view everything from a perspective of devotion. For instance, a soul devoted to God observes others and assesses their level of devotion, building relationships accordingly. A person's ego is always a personal thing. We always look at the ego when we build relationships with someone. For instance, when a woman looks at a man, what's her goal? She looks and tries to understand whether he sees her beauty. If he appreciates her beauty, she feels a closer connection. If not, she finds him less interesting and she keeps him at a distance. Conversely, a soul relying on God evaluates everyone based on this spiritual foundation. If someone does not engage in spiritual practices, the soul feels compassion, recognizing their lack of self-realization, their foolishness. If the soul sees that the person also relies on God, it builds a close relationship with them, because people's perception of this world is shaped according to what they rely on. Thus, a person's sense of dignity gives them their perception of the world. Duality stems from one's sense of dignity. For example, if you rely on your piety and observe others, you may judge them based on whether they acknowledge your piety. But if they notice your sins and you see that they see your sins, you might have a negative attitude towards them. Thus, duality means that a person, based on their dignity, views everyone according to how they relate to this person. And thus people live in duality because they don't perceive the truth, but when someone sees everything from the perspective of relying on God, then they see everything clearly, because they see the developmental level of those who don't rely on God. But one does not look at them from a position of duality, but with a desire to help. Because a soul that relies on God becomes so powerful that it stops competing with everyone or trying to be better than others. It feels happiness. Like a billionaire who, confident in their wealth, does not compare their power to the power of others, the billionaire is aware of their own power and recognizes everyone as needing their assistance. If such a billionaire is in the right state of mind, they will help everyone and will care for others. Because one understands that everyone around is weak, but with another billionaire one would speak as an equal. Thus, a soul that relies on God becomes so powerful and pure that it feels compassion for all people and builds intimate relationships only with another soul that also relies on God and helps all other people, helps and cares for them. Because a soul that relies on God knows no other life. So we have discussed a bit about human ego. Ego also attaches itself strongly. It identifies with something. For example, a woman's ego strongly identifies with her children and her husband, and she lives their life. What does this mean? If her child or husband is distressed, she also feels distressed. She has a stronger attachment to her children than to her husband. Thus, a woman's attachment to children is stronger. Therefore, between her husband and child, a woman always chooses the child, because the attachment is stronger. In contrast, men typically have a stronger attachment to a woman than to their children. A man's love for his child is often mediated through his love for the woman. But if he does not love the woman, and they have a child, the attachment to his child remains, but it becomes very weak. He still cares about the child, but not as intensely as before. Generally, men claim ownership over women, while women claim ownership over their children. That's how this world works. When a woman feels owned by a man, she feels better than if she is not owned. However, she also keeps a very close watch on the man's ego. Because if she's owned and feels that he has deprived her of the right to live, considering her as his property, she starts to rebel. She pounds her fists on her chest, demanding her right to live, while still remaining owned. That's how a woman's system works. As soon as someone claims her, she immediately starts to adjust that man's ego and tries to make him such that he does not hinder her from living happily in an owned state. If he becomes an obstacle, she will pound on his chest until the last drop of blood, because in this case she feels oppressed. That's how a woman's ego functions. She seeks protection from the man and claims her children. But she also claims her husband, albeit in a subordinate state. She still keeps an eye on him, constantly nagging him. Men, conversely, find themselves in a position of freedom before falling in love. But once love enters their lives, they may feel ensnared by the situation, becoming bound by it. It's crucial to understand the differences between male and female egos. The female ego is deeply connected to love. Given that love is considered the highest virtue, a woman's ego is totally convinced that the woman is inherently good. Women generally perceive themselves as good persons. Men also tend to believe that women are exceptionally good, which is often reflected in their behavior of caring and supporting others. However, if a man fails to recognize and appreciate a woman's inherent goodness, she may perceive him as deeply flawed. It can be challenging for a man to fully grasp and acknowledge his wife's goodness. If he is unaware or uneducated, he might only see her flaws, making her very indignant. This leads to a familiar joke. A man's biography might read, "He was born, behaved badly, and died." Naturally, if he had a wife, then he was bad and died. That's the biography of a man, because he's constantly bad due to his misunderstanding of women. Born, was bad, and died. That's a man's biography. It's a great joke. I really like it. It reflects the essence of things. Or, for example, a woman. She was born, was good, and died. Something like that. We are studying the function of a person's sense of self-worth, and it's important to understand that there are gradations. For example, when a person becomes very attached to their dignity, to their good deeds, to their piety. When a person is very attached, it's called living in passion. This means the person is very proud of themselves. This is called living in passion. When a person gets attached, for instance, a woman gets strongly attached to her children, a man gets strongly attached to a woman, they forget about their own dignity. The woman starts to identify herself with her children, the man identifies himself with the woman, and they forget about themselves. This is called living in degradation. Life in degradation also occurs when a person identifies not with their virtues but with their sins. They honestly consider their sins to be something good and correct in life. Remember, when a person considers their sins to be correct and they have many sins, it is called demonism. Demonism is the form of incorrect functioning of self-esteem. A demon might have a clear mind and intelligence, but their sense of self-worth is misguided. They consider their sins or their separation from God to be something very cool and pride themselves on it, or they think of themselves as a god, so to speak. Thus, demonism is also a form of degradation, but of a different nature. When a person identifies with their close ones, with their children, with their spouse, this is a weak form of degradation. Such people function very weakly in life. And when a person relies on their own strength, the most dangerous are those who perform asceticism practices, but not for God. They do it to strengthen themselves in a very pronounced and significant way. This reliance on one's own strength and confidence that asceticism practices can conquer the world constitutes demonism. When a person masters asceticism practices, they must dedicate even more of themselves and all their energy acquired from asceticism practices to serving God, because otherwise one can stray far off the path. The stronger a person feels, the more they can fight against those who do not love them, defending their rights, and so on. Therefore, Asceticism practices must always be combined with service. Asceticism practices should not be considered the foundation of one's life. Demons engage in this. They perform asceticism practices, strengthen their dignity, focus on themselves rather than God, believe in themselves, and defend their rights in this world, fighting against all who do not believe in them. And they do this through their asceticism practices. And not only through asceticism practices, they also try to do good deeds to bolster their dignity through these deeds. That is demonism. Divine personalities, on the contrary, are those who subordinate their good deeds and their asceticism practices to the service of God. That is the difference. Thus, the sense of self-worth is a personal energy, always connected with personality. There may also be another interesting variation. Recently, I heard a story about Lama, maybe a joke, maybe not, but it's a real story. The Lama asks his disciple, what do you do in your free time? The disciple says, I watch how the trees grow. And the Lama says, you're still fussing about. So just imagine how trees grow. It's a slow process. This is another aspect of self-worth when a person's dignity merges with the radiance of God. It's really an amazing state for a person where they are simply in happiness and see and hear nothing but this happiness. And this state is called spiritual self-annihilation. Because when a person only feels happiness and identifies themselves with this happiness and is completely united with it, in this case, the person loses their self-worth because they lose their sense of self. They dissolve into this happiness and do not feel themselves at all. There are two ways to dissolve in happiness and lose oneself, and only two states of this exist. It's called the state of destroying one's dignity. The first state is merging with the energy of God, and the second state is merging with the body of God. And it's interesting that God allows one to merge with his body. I don't want to speculate, but it seems logical to assume that the body of God consists of souls that have lost their individuality and have simply merged with his body. Well, this is a theory. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but the effulgence of God definitely consists of souls that have lost their individuality, and this effulgence flows from the spiritual worlds towards the material. In other words, all these souls very slowly move towards physical existence. When I was standing near the Wailing Wall, I felt all my previous lives in this world. I felt that I have lived here for half of the first day, half of the last day, and a whole day before that, meaning I've lived exactly 2 days of Brahma in this world. I also sensed that for approximately 1 Brahma's day and a half, I had been traveling from the spiritual realm to these material universes. People ask about various reasons for ending up in the material world. I assume that the soul in the spiritual world became too deeply immersed in its own happiness. That means it first entered into the effulgence of God, then into the material world. Well, again, these are just my assumptions. I don't know exactly how it happens, but taking into account what I saw, I came to this conclusion. Another way a soul loses its individuality is by deeply immersing itself in matter, which can lead to reincarnation in forms like a tree. Like if you're as dull as a tree, you'll be born a baobab and remain one for 1,000 years until you die. When a soul merges with matter, it becomes encased in a dense layer of self-worth. This layer, or coating of self-worth, dictates the form of the soul's existence. Essentially, the soul's consciousness becomes fully identified with matter. Identifying oneself is indeed the sense of self-worth. The soul's consciousness has completely merged with matter. All the consciousness of the soul connects with matter. This is the life form of a tree. In animal life forms, the consciousness of the soul, to some extent, connects with physical and the subtle energy body. With physical body and subtle energy, different combinations result in different types of animal life forms. But we can notice that all animal life forms are physically stronger than people. Take, for example, some monkey. We won't talk about a gorilla that weighs 150 kilograms. It is obviously 10 times stronger than a human. Let's take a monkey that weighs, say, 40 or 50 kilograms. This monkey is stronger than an 80-kilogram person. Or Wolverine, an animal that weighs only 25 kilograms. This animal can easily tear apart a human being. Or a wolf, which weighs about 30 kilograms. A person doesn't even have a chance to survive if meets a wolf. The wolf can easily overpower a human, and the person has no chance of surviving because the wolf is stronger than a human. That means that human energy is very much directed into the subtle energy body, and therefore humans have little physical strength, while animals have a lot of their energy directed into the physical body. Any gazelle develops such a speed. We can't even ride a bicycle as fast as it runs, or an eagle flies, or a bear, or a tiger. These animals possess tremendous strength. Why do they have so much strength? Because their energy of consciousness goes into their physical body. In animals, the energy of consciousness is directed into their subtle energy body as well. Therefore, animals have a very strong psyche. Their will to live is stronger than that of humans. Whereas in humans, the energy of consciousness is directed into the subtle energy body of intelligence, and therefore humans attain an intelligent form of life because our energy of consciousness mainly goes into intelligence, which is why we are born in human form. And the more developed an animal is, the more its energy of consciousness goes into the subtle energy body and less into the physical body. Consequently, domestic animals like cows, goats, dogs, compared to wolves, cats, are physically weaker than those wild animals, but at the same time, they are capable of interacting with humans. They smile at people, feel loyalty, wag their tails. This means that their consciousness already permeates the subtle energy body, and this means that they have a more developed form of life than other animals. Consequently, a fish is hardly aware of itself. It's a weak animal form of life, barely surviving, but at the same time, consciousness is completely directed into its physical body and hardly into the subtle energy body. Its subtle energy body functions weakly. So yesterday we talked about manas, the framework of a person, the subtle energy body. We talked about intelligence and where it's located. Today we talked about the self-worth of a person. It should be known that self-worth is the subtlest structure, and self-worth, or the sense of self as a personality, is the subtlest material element. There are only 8 material elements. There's the element of ether, the element of air, and prana. First, space was created in which we live. The primary element of ether makes it possible for space to exist. If there was no ether, there would be no space, no universe. First in the universe, ether was created. Then the element of air was created. Air gives the ability for everything to move. Everything moves. This is done by the energy of air. Then the fire element related to transformations was created, the transformation of everything in the universe. Then the water element, which connects everything, was created. Then the earth element was created. From the creation of the first earth element, forms emerged. Everything got its shapes. Planets appeared. Before the existence of the element of earth, there were no planets. And then living entities appeared thanks to the subtle energy elements which allow life to exist on earth. And without the first element of mind, it's impossible for life to exist on earth. Therefore, some religious figures believe that trees do not have souls. It is a misconception, because the first element of mind can only connect with the soul. It simply cannot exist within matter. Therefore, if there is the first element of mind, say a tree has a subtle energy structure, then there is definitely a soul there. It's 100% sure. Because without a soul, the subtle energy structure cannot exist within matter. Accordingly, subtler than the first element of mind is the first element of intelligence, which not only allows the soul to live within matter, but also gives it the ability to evolve and become aware of itself. And even subtler than the first element of intelligence is the first element of ego. This is the subtlest material component that exists. And the first element of ego gives the possibility to any living being to become aware of itself within physical objects. When the universe is being created from the body of Lord Mahavishnu, who lies on the causal ocean, countless universes emerge when he exhales. And these universes initially consist purely of ego, which is not yet aware of itself, and therefore it is called pradana, which means the ego which lacks self-awareness. And then pradana is fertilized by the gaze of the Lord, and it transforms into self-aware energy. As a result, a subtle energy structure emerges, the universe that recognizes itself, and it is called intelligence in degradation. Self-awareness in degradation, or mahatattva. Mahatattva is the enlivened universe, or the active false ego, which then gives birth to all forms of existence in the universe. This is the original subtle energy structure, which then gives birth to everything that exists in the universe. Therefore, ego is the deepest part of material existence. As long as a person does not renounce their ego, they are still connected with this universe, and they depend on it, on its life, and they cannot connect with the Lord. They move away from the spiritual reality. Therefore, devotion to God, or identifying oneself with the Spirit, with the Supreme Spirit, with God, is the basis for a living being to leave the material universe. As long as one considers themselves material, they can never leave this universe because they are connected with the universe and not with God in this case. This is a very complex topic overall. I also may not understand this information deeply enough. I have told you everything I understand. You go ahead and explore all this information on your own. And we will move on to studying more practical issues for our lives. We are moving on to the study of the 5 layers of the human energy field, which we have been actively studying recently. Because knowledge about these 5 energy layers gives the opportunity to live a healthy and happy life in this material world. Because these 5 energy layers permeate the manas, the entire subtle energy body, they are a system that connects all the subtle functions of a person. So if compared to a glass of water, the 5 layers of the human energy field are the glass, and everything poured into it is the water, and Shrotas, nadis, and chakras are poured in it. Everything is in the glass, and the foundation of the glass are 5 energy layers in which human life flows. The energies of the soul's consciousness circulate in these 5 energy layers. More accurately, it is the energy of God's consciousness that circulates, not the soul's, because it is God who controls the subtle energy body of a person. But the soul's consciousness is actively involved because there is an order and an execution. The soul's consciousness is the order, and the consciousness of God is the executor. Suppose the soul wants to live. As a result of this desire, the energy of prana belonging to God begins to act throughout the subtle energy body. The soul wants to know, and then the energy of the sun, or tejas, begins to act throughout the subtle energy body, and the soul wants to love, and then the energy of ojas begins to act throughout the subtle energy body. Thus, it must be clearly understood that throughout the subtle energy body, it is primarily the energy of God that acts, but without the desire of the soul, it would not act there. There's such a connection. The soul makes the order, and God fulfills it. That means God serves us fully, and therefore we should be very grateful to Him, because life itself in this world exists only according to our desire and due to His service to us, as if by magic. Only thanks to His service we have the opportunity to live in the material world. And to be more precise, the material universe itself is created by the desire of souls to live in the material world, to live for themselves. If such a desire did not exist, the universe would also not exist. It is created because God wants to serve us, wants to give us the opportunity to develop, live in this world and be happy. 3 types of energy move through these 5 energy layers. These are all God's energies, the energies of the soul. God also has 3 types of energy. He has the energy of happiness, of love. He is woven from bliss. God's bliss, ananda, is eternal bliss. There is the energy of chit, the energy of knowledge. There is the energy of eternity, or sat, chit, ananda. So God is woven from these 3 energies of sat, chit, ananda. The soul also has these 3 energies, but they exist in a state of desire, meaning the soul, as a divine fragment, is completely dependent on the energy of God. The desire to have these energies gives the soul the ability to possess them. So if there is no desire, there will be no energy. If there is a desire, there will be energy. That means the soul can be energetically empty if it has no desires. Therefore, the soul may possess different strength. There are souls with stronger desires who have more energy, and there are souls with less desire who have less energy. Now we will study how these energies move within us in the subtle energy body. There are 5 layers of the human energy field, like a matryoshka doll, each deeper than the last, and any influence on these 5 energy layers is possible only from outside to inside. This is very important to understand because many people do not get this, and it's a big problem. So cleansing your subtle energy body is only possible from the outside and only through continuous influence on the subtle energy body. And this is a trap for many people because people do not understand this. Suppose a person thinks, I will exercise every day for an hour and it will bring me health. This is a misconception because exercises should be done at least once a week, not for an hour, but much more, because otherwise you only cleanse the outer 1.5 energy layers. And the remaining 3.5 energy layers get clogged up in the meantime. Without this knowledge, it is impossible to be healthy and live for a long time. The person says, I will bathe in an ice hole and always be healthy because I will be in contact with the energy of water. And what do? They dip into the ice hole, come out, and thus only half of the first energy layer is cleansed. And the other energy layers get clogged. It also creates an imbalance between the energy of the first layer and all the others. And this also leads to very big problems. Therefore, without knowledge, it is very difficult to be healthy. Or you need to intuitively understand, feel what you need to do more, or just possess this knowledge. Therefore, this knowledge is very important. If we go deeper, each layer of the human energy field has subdivisions. There are 7 types in total. If you consider the entire subtle energy body, it has 35 divisions. And these subdivisions also need to be known because depending on where the energetic blockages are located, that's where their effect will be. For example, all the subdivisions of the first energy layer are very much connected with interacting with this world or with people. Generally, these subdivisions are called dhatu. They are described in Ayurveda. It is possible that this knowledge exists in ancient Sanskrit books, but I have not found this information anywhere. Ayurveda doesn't describe 5 layers of the human energy field, but it describes 7 subdivisions, dhatu. The first subdivision is called rasa dhatu. It is associated with the skin, mucous membranes, and nourishment. The second subdivision is called Rakta Dhatu. It is associated with blood vessels and blood. The third subdivision is called Mamsa Dhatu. It is associated with everything to do with muscles. The fourth subdivision is Meda Dhatu. It is associated with internal organs and fat tissue. The fifth subdivision is called Asti Dhatu. It is associated with bones and joints. The sixth subdivision is called Majja Dhatu. It is associated with the nervous system. And the seventh subdivision is called Shukra Dhatu. It is associated with hormonal functions. I mention this because each energy layer has its features. For example, how do energetic blockages exist? Usually a blockage related to the physical body is the size of one dhatu. It does not exceed the size of one dhatu. And a blockage in the subtle energy body is generally the size of 2 dhatus. It does not extend beyond 2 dhatus. There is also a predisposition to energetic blockages, which is the size of 4 dhatus. That means the predisposition to blockages is larger in size than the blockage itself. The predisposition to energetic blockages clogs the subtle energy body. Moreover, these predispositions never change throughout life. They are in a fixed state, and the predisposition occupies 4 dhatus, which is more than half of the energy layer. If a person does not do cleansing, then the subtle energy body is blocked to a maximum of 2 dhatus, and the physical body is blocked at 1 dhatu. Suppose there is an energetic blockage in the middle of the physical body. If from Rasa Dhatu to Meda Dhatu there is a continuous predisposition to an energetic blockage, then the blockage itself will be in the middle of this predisposition. This means it will occupy half of Rakta Dhatu and half of Mamsa Dhatu. Suppose this physical blockage occupies only Mamsa Dhatu, it's the third energy layer. This means that the person's vascular muscles will be affected, and muscles in general as well, because the third energy layer is associated with muscles. And their heart muscle may be affected, possibly the muscles of the uterus too. When the main energetic blockage is in the third subdivision of the third energy layer, the person is prone to such diseases: damage to the vascular wall, meaning there will be vascular spasms, muscle damage, uterine damage in women, urethral damage in men. The heart may be affected. This depends on where in the body these blockages have a bigger impact. They are not the same throughout the body. Sometimes these blockages are located lower, sometimes higher. If the basic blockage, the main energetic blockage, is directed at Rakta Dhatu in the third energy layer, then mainly the vessels are affected, the entire vascular system begins to suffer. And if in the third energy layer the blockage is on Majja Dhatu, which is associated with the nervous system, accordingly, the nervous tissues of vessels, joints, and muscles will suffer. If the damage occurs on Shukra Dhatu, on the third energy layer, then accordingly the hormonal regulation of vessels, muscles, and joints will suffer. If it occurs on Asti Dhatu, then mainly joints will suffer, but vessels will not, because Asti Dhatu is associated with the skeletal system. It is important to understand that these small dhatus also matter, because this understanding allows a person to know exactly what part of the body will be affected. For example, the fourth energy layer is associated with the spine, large joints such as the hip or shoulder joints, bones of the entire body, including the bones of the skull, and internal organs such as the thyroid, kidneys, liver, lungs. If the Meda Dhatu is afflicted on the fourth energy layer, which affects the physical body, then the internal organs will be affected. If Asti Dhatu is afflicted, then bones will be affected. If Mamsa Dhatu, then the large joints, like hip and shoulder joints, will be affected. So the location of the blockage, this small brick that affects the physical body, is crucial. Even within the energy layer, it will specifically affect those functions it is associated with. Even subtle blockages which affect 2 dhatus also matter. Because all these subdivisions, Rasa Dhatu, Rakta Dhatu, also have their subtle energy properties. But this is a more complex topic, and I haven't deeply studied it yet. I cannot say exactly how the psyche will change, depending on the location of these blockages. It is possible to study this and then tell you about it. If we talk about all the small subdivisions, they all have their individual significance. All 35 subdivisions are associated with specific parts of our physical body and subtle energy body as well. To put it briefly, the first energy layer is associated with our interaction with this world. The second layer is related to emotions. The third layer is related to thoughts. The fourth layer is related to mood. And the fifth layer is associated with a deep sensation of our life. For example, the deep feeling of whether I am happy or unhappy is on the fifth energy layer. The deep feeling of whether I am calm or restless is also on the fifth energy layer. Calmness is the energy of water. Happiness is the energy of the sun. The feeling about whether I am fulfilling the tasks of my life or not is on the fifth energy layer. These feelings can be disrupted by energetic blockages or general tension. In all these 5 layers, 3 types of energy circulate, and accordingly there are also 3 types of energetic blockages, each corresponding to its energy type. Suppose, at the beginning of the 4th energy layer, I have a static tension blockage, but there is no dynamic tension blockage. What I mean is, I have a predisposition to an energetic blockage. And the predisposition to dynamic tension blockage is in the middle of the 3rd energy layer, and the predisposition to toxin blockage is at the beginning of the 2nd energy layer. And my research has shown that in the human body there are 3 major blockages of each type of energy disruption. There are 3 major disruptions of water energy and 1 minor one. So there are 4 disruptions of each type in all 5 energy layers, and their interaction leads to a propensity for chronic diseases. If a person's energetic blockages do not connect with each other and are diagonally placed relative to each other, then the person has a small tendency towards chronic diseases. But if the energetic blockages are located vertically, there is a great tendency towards chronic diseases. For example, if all 3 blockages are aligned and synchronized, it results in an incurable disease. And if 2 energetic blockages are positioned in this way, it's also hard to remove them, but not as hard as 3. Having 3 blockages is like a curse. I'm explaining this so that people would come to get diagnostics of their 5 layers of the human energy field. The most important thing is that I can diagnose all these energetic blockages, and you will know the map of your subtle energy structure. It costs $325, and it is good for those who are seriously ill. It helps to know exactly where the problem is and what to do with it. So when a person undergoes cleansing, the 1st energy layer is being cleansed, then the next one, and finally the 5th, the last energy layer. That's the first thing to know. Second, the blockages of the physical body are cleansed first. Then the blockages of the subtle energy body. In terms of time, blockages of the physical body are cleansed in about 7-8 months from the start of cleansing, while blockages of the subtle energy body are cleansed up to 3 years. This means that if you do all the asceticism practices for 3 years, your quality of life and character change by about 80%. That means you feel much better than before, and at the same time all your diseases naturally pass, or almost pass. The next thing to know is that a person has 2 types of energy movement disorders in the body. The first type of disorder is the overall contamination of the energy layers. I'll explain to make it clearer. Suppose one suffers from a lack of water energy or general static tension. That means that you need to replenish, not just remove energetic blockages. Therefore, a general energy disorder is always treated by contacting the corresponding element of nature. Some people say, "Why do I need this? It's artificial to stay in water." What does one mean by artificial? If you have a general water energy disorder, you have to stay in water to overcome it. How do people feel if they have a general disorder? They are highly sensitive, they are restless people. Their overall sensitivity is high, they are touchy, angry, vulnerable, sensitive, and find it very hard to interact with others. Generally, this means you need to stay in water. If you practice this, then your overall calmness increases, making you a more peaceful person. This is very important to know. Calmness is a cool thing. For example, someone might endlessly perfect relationships, but if they do not remove the general tension, they will still argue because general tension often results in people not tolerating each other. Therefore, staying in water, in the air, and in the sun is a very important factor, giving a person a stable and calm life, so that they don't feel like they're missing something in life. Accordingly, a general lack of prana energy makes a person weak. They become weak, as they say, neither fish nor fowl. Such a weak person says, "Hello, now I will explain to you in detail about the subtle energy layers of the body." That means their voice is weak, they look downcast. This is a sign of a lack of prana. And what should be done? Just go and stand in your underwear in sub-zero temperatures, or in the summer stand in strong wind, or when a person goes to mountains, one also gets replenished by prana. So if a person does not stay in the fresh air, there will be no general prana, it will not enter the person. And why is the person frail? Because their pranic channels and the ability to absorb prana into the body are weak. It must also be understood that when a person performs asceticism practices, they increase their ability to absorb prana. Suppose a person stands in the frost undressed. In this case, one absorbs prana very intensely. But if a person's channels are weak, they get overstressed and may get sick. Therefore, gradual exposure to fresher air and stronger wind allows a person to absorb prana more and more intensely. Then this leads to very strong vigor and strength. Naturally, for a woman, this translates into beauty. Some women ask, "I just can't get married, I can't meet anyone." When you don't meet anyone, it means you lack general prana. Because the ability to captivate someone with your gaze is given by the energy of prana. So if a woman who has a lot of prana looks at a man, she can pierce through a man, and he unexpectedly decides to meet her. In reality, she exerts her influence on him. Or consider the general energy of the sun. Look at people from the south. They are generally cheerful, joyful, active, very temperamental. The word temperament signifies the vitality of life. The stronger the sun shines, the more lively the person. The less the sun, the more unemotional they appear. For example, in Georgia, the sun shines strongly, and there are also the mountains. There's a lot of prana and a lot of sun. People have a quick voice, active, combative gaze. That means they have a very strong mental impact. Their eyes blaze. They have lots of prana and sun. In non-mountainous areas like Azerbaijan, for instance, people are very temperamental. They are positive, relaxed, but when something goes wrong, they lose their temper. They get very offended and show their temperament. This happens because there is a lot of sun but no mountains, so there isn't much prana. So wherever a person may be, there is a natural absorption of energy into the body, and life depends on this natural absorption. I flew through Reykjavik to America. In Iceland, like in all other places close to the pole, there are volcanic rocks instead of soil. It's like pumice, used for scrubbing heels. It's a volcanic porous soil. And the entire territory is covered with volcanic boulders. I was there in the summer, and everything was also covered with moss. The whole area was covered with rippled green mounds. There are small trees, there are small pines, small firs, and small birches. Small means a maximum of 1 meter in height, and everything smells of hydrogen sulfide because there are many geysers that create whole lakes of hot water. This is what this country is like. The people there are very slow. Since it's cold in Iceland, the people there are pure, full of prana. They have a lot of energy. They think slowly and they are not emotional. You ask someone, "Can we go to the springs?" The person pauses, then answers unemotionally, "Yes," and you don't understand whether they are pleased that you are going with them or not. These are the northerners. Even Estonia, which is the northernmost of all the Baltic countries, is subject to such influence. There are even jokes about Estonians having slow perception. I heard such a joke in childhood. An Estonian is riding on a rail bike and sees a person waving at them. The Estonian stops, and another Estonian asks, "Is Tallinn far?" The person answers, 100 kilometers to Tallinn. "Will you take me with you?" "I will." They ride for an hour, for 2 hours, and the passenger asks, "Is Tallinn far away?" And the Estonian answers, "Now it's far." They went the wrong way. They misunderstood each other. This is the northern way of thinking. Therefore, a person's temperament is very dependent on energy, but all this can be changed. If a person, for instance, practices fasting, they absorb the sun's energy even in the north, and they will be very temperamental. If a person runs, they will be full of prana even without living in the mountains, and they will be very strong. If a person does static exercises, then one absorbs water energy into themselves even in a dry area. In other words, a person's overall energy depends on asceticism practices, not only on the climate, but the climate also has a very strong influence. Therefore, it is important to practice fasting when living in the north to absorb the sun's energy. It's important to go to the sauna to absorb the sun's energy. It's important to use solar products, for instance, to apply to the skin-clarified butter ghee to pump the sun's energy into the body. For those living in the south, the main problem is cooling down. They need to stay in water. For example, Indians stand in water twice a day. They have a rule that one must frequently come into contact with water to prevent overheating from the sun. So depending on the climate, a person must balance their life based on where they are located. And this needs to be done in addition to the basic asceticism practices we are talking about. Suppose you live on a plain. That means you need to contact water more often. Stay in water twice a week. If you live near water, you should try to engage in prolonged continuous movement. When there's a lot of water but little sun, consequently, you need to practice fasting to absorb the sun, go to saunas to absorb the sun, and use more ghee to enrich your food with the sun, and engage in prolonged continuous movement. Run more because a large amount of water reduces the energy of prana, making people weak-willed and depressive. There's a lack of prana because there's too much water and not enough sun. Thus, depending on the climate, a person should balance their contact with the basic elements of nature within the body. Without this balance, even despite asceticism practice, some health problems can begin. Accordingly, it is more favorable to live in a balanced climate, for example, in Odessa, Krasnodar, Venice. These regions are considered to have the best climate on Earth, with more balanced energy. There's enough sun, water, and air, especially if living near water. This is roughly what I'm explaining to you. Now regarding asceticism practices. Among these three energies, water energy, air energy, and sun energy, water is the most delicate energy. Therefore, all bodily cleanses should start with it. Always start by passively absorbing water energy wherever you live, whether in the north, south, mountains, or underground. For example, the Dead Sea is located almost a kilometer below sea level. Thus, the Dead Sea is basically a depression. It's minus a kilometer below sea level, so there are certain aspects of life there. Mountains are above sea level, but even on the earth, people live below sea level. In such places, life has its own characteristics. For example, in the mountains, a person is easily toned. Georgians are constantly in tone. But when a person lives below, they find it hard to push themselves to do something. They are mostly relaxed. If a person is overexcited, they need to go down to a place below sea level and live there, on the Dead Sea. But if a person is very relaxed, then they need to go to the mountains. Speaking of bodily cleansing, you should always start with water. Start by learning to stay in water at mild temperatures, like staying in 28-degree water for 70 minutes. At 28 degrees, water energy is weak. There's neither water nor fire in it, so staying in such water is very difficult. It's easier to sit in an ice hole. It's easier to stay in an ice hole for 4.5 minutes than for 70 minutes in water, where there's no water energy, no fire, no air. It's very tiring. But for people who lack energy, it's better to start at such a temperature. Otherwise, they might get overexcited. When water energy overwhelms a person too much, it can lead to a propensity for inflammatory processes. It's interesting to know that even if a person jumps into an ice hole without any preparation, sits there for 4.5 minutes, and cleanses the entire body, and then goes into a steam room and lies down in the heat, there will be no imbalance. Because the water is covered by fire, and then one should end this practice with staying in water again. You should always start with water and finish with water. This will always be correct. Suppose a person goes for a run, then stays in water, then there won't be any stress from running, even if the person is untrained and not inclined to running. To absorb the sun, you need to first get into the water, then stay in the sun, then go back into the water. Water is the most delicate environment, so you should always start and finish with it, especially if you are untrained. If trained, it doesn't matter to the person. A person can jump into an ice hole, then skip staying in a hot sauna, and the body will still recover. For those who are untrained, it's crucial to maintain balance among different elements of nature. Remember this rule. If you spend a lot of time in water, you must also do static exercises. Without them, the water energy remains unabsorbed and circulates freely in your body without integrating properly. If you spend a lot of time in water but neglect static exercises, you might develop inflammatory issues in your body. Next rule, suppose you run on a treadmill in a gym but don't go outside in the fresh air. There will come a time when you won't be able to run in the gym because you'll experience severe weakness. Your willpower functions will suffer due to overexertion. This happens because you're not absorbing the air energy properly. You're merely utilizing it. Running outdoors is preferable. Running in the mountains and in cold weather is even better than running in the sun in the lowlands. Essentially, it's better to run where there's a high concentration of prana to maximize its absorption. However, you should know there are people whose pranic channels are weak or underdeveloped. If your energy level is low, then you need to start with walking, and maybe in a gym because you might catch a cold outside. And if you're alive, active, and can run in the cold, then run in the cold instead of walking, and everything will be fine for you. People also differ from each other. Some have developed subtle energy layers, others have undeveloped layers. That's why their life is weak. There's a song that goes like this: if you're feeble, get ready for death. To preserve health, fortify your body with water. That means you need to contact water if you want to be healthy. The same applies to sun energy. There's the sun in general and there's the absorption of it. Simply being in the sun provides general energy, but if you don't practice fasting, people who go to the resorts to restore their health know that it is beneficial to practice fasting there. They find it healthy to eat only berries and watermelons. The body itself asks for it because when you receive a lot of the sun's energy, but you cannot absorb it by the means of asceticism practices, then the sun will suppress you. So, is this rule clear? When we receive energy, we need to absorb it by the means of asceticism practices afterward, otherwise it will create problems. The next rule I've already mentioned. One should start with water, then practice stationary position of the body, then do dynamic exercises, and then fasting. It's essential to begin by contacting water. It is the very first thing people should be advised. Then you should advise to practice stationary position of the body, followed by walks in the fresh air. Then, one should perform prolonged continuous movement outdoors, followed by contact with the sun or sauna, to absorb solar energy in a passive way. And then one can start fasting. Fasting is the last practice. Moreover, there are 3 types of fasting. The first type of fasting means eating only greens, which is a passive fasting. Just blend a spinach leaf in water and that's all. Passive fasting means eating greens. Why greens? Because greens also cleanse the body. It's the only type of food that cleanses energetic blockages in the body. Greens are considered solar food. How can other living beings assimilate the sun when it shines? The only way to assimilate the sun is to eat greens. Only greens and leaves assimilate the sun. Of course, humans and any animal can assimilate the sun directly but not transform it into matter. We don't transform it into food. We assimilate the sun, but we don't become leaves that cows can eat. You could make a fantasy movie about a person in the sun who sprouts and turns into leaves. This is an idea for fantasizers, but in reality, this happens only with trees. A tree stands leafless, and as soon as the sun becomes strong, it begins to sprout leaves. This means the tree has begun to assimilate the energy of the sun. Consequently, there are leaves with weak energy. For instance, a fir tree's energy is very strong, so the leaves of the fir, the needles, are very sharp, bitter, or sour, impossible to eat. But there are plants with weak energy, and plants with weak energy are those that humans can digest and assimilate. If a person lives somewhere in the forest, one is an ascetic person. For them, practically everything becomes food. Such people can eat any leaves, and they all will be digested, because their energy has become very strong. Energies of the sun, air, and water are strong in their body. One lives like the Yeti in the mountains. Suppose one has no home there and stays outside in winter, sleeps on the snow, in summer, sleeps in the sun. The person is fully connected with the elements of nature. Their energy is extremely strong. By the way, this increases lifespan several times. Hence the answer, why did people in ancient cultures live up to 150 years? Because they lived in nature, they were constantly in the fresh air. Why is life expectancy decreasing? Because we've moved from nature into comfortable homes. We lack contact with nature and our bodies become weak. But if a person lives in nature, they can practically eat any leaves. I mean beneficial kinds of plants. Because there can be poisonous plants, and of course those you can't eat. But we are weak living beings, and only the weakest plants, the leaves, are suitable for us, like a lettuce leaf, for example. It has very weak energy, and if a person blends a lettuce leaf in a blender and drinks it, it leads to a passive cleansing of the body. It clears negative energy, replenishes solar energy, and removes energetic blockages to some extent. A person can effectively practice fasting by eating just lettuce. Suppose you eat on Monday evening, then naturally you don't eat overnight, then spend the day eating only greens and don't eat at night again. That makes 36 hours of fasting. You can practice such fasting once a week to remove all toxins from your body and cleanse energetic blockages through passive fasting, eating only greens. The second type of fasting is water fasting. Water fasting is more effective than eating greens. And why is water fasting necessary? Because it cools us down from excessive contact with the sun. Our energy layers aren't accustomed to solar energy. We are delicate and pampered. And when a person practices fasting without water, they often overheat and feel ill from such fasting. But if they drink water, it makes the cleansing process easier and gentler. But later, when a person has expelled all toxins from the body and their subtle energy body is clean, they can practice fasting without water, and waterless fasting is the most effective type of fasting. And thus fasting for 2.5 days is a physiological fasting that cleanses all 5 energy layers. Now the question arises, can you clean 5 energy layers twice? For instance, practice water fasting for 5 days? In theory, it's possible, but practically, as I understand, if a person redoubles all asceticism practices, then there's a reason for it. Because it's very dangerous. You'll have to bathe in icy water not for 4.5 minutes, but for 9 minutes. Then practice stationary position of the body not for 1 hour and 5 minutes, but for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Then run 34 kilometers instead of 17, and do fasting for 5 days. Extend your exposure in the bright sun, not just for 2 hours and 5 minutes, but for 4 hours and 10 minutes. If you redouble all asceticism practices, you'll gradually become like a Terminator. This transformation isn't immediate. Initially, it will be quite challenging as your body undergoes restructuring. Eventually, you'll attain a state of remarkable resilience. But if you then stop redoubling asceticism practices, you will start to experience a strong imbalance in the body. It's the same as being left without food, so it's not practical. Of course, if someone aspires to be a Terminator, they can redouble their asceticism practices and dedicate their life to it. In theory, if a person increases asceticism practices 4 to 5 times, it might even stimulate the regrowth of lost teeth, because a strong rejuvenation process would take place. and maybe such a person will live for 150 years. That's my assumption. If there are no unfortunate accidents occur because of the great cruelty committed in previous lives. And this cruelty leads to a premature death. No one in this world is safe from death. But if there are no unfortunate accidents, then by my estimation, taking into account all my activities, I can live to be 86 years old by doing all the asceticism practices. If I don't travel anywhere, I might live to be 95 years old if I maintain my current lifestyle. And you, similarly, can easily live to be 80, 90 years old without diseases, if you live this way and cleanse all 5 energy layers. This knowledge is unique on earth. It provides longevity to a person and also greatly improves the quality of life. Generally, you should know that the cleansing starts with the first energy layer, then the second layer is cleansed, then the third, then the fourth, and finally the 5th energy layer. First, the physical body is cleansed of energetic blockages. Then the subtle energy body is cleansed of blockages. Once the subtle energy body is cleared of energetic blockages, there are no obstacles left for the body's healing, and the body begins to recover when the energetic blockages of the physical body are removed. If the physical body is thoroughly cleansed, and the subtle energy body is slightly cleansed, then chronic diseases immediately start to heal. This healing process will take place for sure. Healing begins within 6-7 months after starting cleansing. Then the chronic diseases begin to heal. First, the physical blockages are removed, then the subtle ones, and then all diseases are treated. A person recovers, becoming healthy. Then, the energy gained from all the asceticism practices is directed towards improving work and personal life. Personal life won't improve much if the body is ill. The body will use energy on itself. If there are energetic blockages, it'll remove them, starting from the physical body and then the subtle energy body. Then health improves, and finally personal life. The same with infertility. First, the body has to become healthy in order to have strong energy, and then the body decides to carry 2 bodies. Because if there's not enough energy, the female body doesn't want to carry 2 organisms, as it lacks the resources. Hence, infertility. And it's not something you can simply fix by taking hormones and conceiving. Infertility means a lack of energy. Therefore, a woman needs to do cleansing. To have a child, she must increase her energy. This also means being able to endure the energy of water, sun, and air. To have children, you need to be strong. And also she needs to be humble, because if a woman behaves aggressively, she doesn't assimilate sperm, she rebels against the male principle. The sperm is there, but the ovum won't let it near. This means that the woman does not internalize male nature. She rebels against it. She needs to learn to be humble to conceive a child. And a man needs to be strong. Angels can conceive children just with a look. This is an immaculate conception. That's how Jesus Christ was conceived, by the look of an angel. If a man is strong, then it's easy for him to conceive a child, because his sperm takes a very active life stance. They even get through barriers. Conception happens no matter how you protect against it. No matter how a woman protects herself, if a man has strong sperm, they will still reach their goal. They will pass through all obstacles and achieve their goal. Therefore, a person has no barriers in life. If one lives correctly, one succeeds in everything. Now, one more thing. For example, when energetic blockages are synchronized in the body, a person has a chronic disease. The most important thing about asceticism practices, when you motivate people to perform them, is the correct beginning of asceticism practices. This is the most difficult and most important. It all depends on the person's diseases, weakness, and age. Suppose a person is sick, weak, and old. This doesn't mean that asceticism practices are not possible for them. It means they need to start them very gently. What does it mean? It means staying in water at 28 degrees Celsius, not colder. You might start by staying in water for 14 minutes, cleansing 1 energy layer, then 28 minutes. Start walking to cleanse only 1 energy layer. For some time you should walk to cleanse only 1 energy layer. Stay in fresh air but not in very cold or very hot weather. Start water fasting for 12 hours or fasting on greens. The gentler the beginning of asceticism practices, the more assuredly a person can perform these practices without harm. Gentle and balanced beginning of asceticism practices is necessary. A person should stay in water, practice stationary position of the body, walk, and practice fasting to cleanse only 1 energy layer. Do everything to cleanse 1 layer over and over. After a month, their energy increases. Then they start to cleanse 2 energy layers, then 3, 4, and 5. All should be done gradually. Gradually doesn't mean years. Within a year, a very sick person can master all the asceticism practices and begin healing. It's crucial to understand that a very gentle beginning of asceticism practices is vital for a very ill person. The sequence is very important. Start with water, then do static exercises, then prolonged continuous movement in fresh air, specifically walking, not running. Then start fasting on greens, followed by water fasting, then fasting without water, and start with a 12-hour fasting on greens, then increase it gradually. If a person is very ill, a gentle beginning of asceticism practices guarantees that the person will not be stressed and will not have any health problems. Again, this means the person could be young and barely alive, or they might have chronic diseases, or be a young, weakened, inactive person, or a middle-aged person with chronic diseases, or an elderly person. Even a healthy elderly person may have weakened energy reserves. Their health reserve is weak, so all asceticism practices should be started very cautiously and gradually developed further. Especially if a person's energetic blockages align in a straight line, this indicates an incurable disease. How to tell if blockages are formed in a straight line? You don't necessarily need diagnostics. Simply, the person has a disease that they cannot get rid of. It's persistent, so you need to be even more cautious. There's such a phenomenon as energy interruption. Energetic blockages in a straight line essentially divide the body into two parts. If the blockage is on the second layer, the energy flow up to the second layer is different from the energy flow after the second layer. Therefore, with such chronic and severe diseases, a person should only cleanse 2 energy layers, and that's it. Once they've thoroughly cleansed the first 2 layers, then they can proceed to cleanse deeper layers. This will guarantee they won't do any harm to themselves. Energy interruption plays a significant role here. For instance, if a person with chronic joint disease, who can barely walk, starts running to cleanse all 5 energy layers, they will get overexerted, because the energy will accumulate strongly in the first 3 energy layers, but poorly in the last 2 layers due to energy interruption, resulting in imbalance. Therefore, it's crucial to first cleanse well up to the 3rd energy layer, remove the energy interruption, and then proceed to cleanse deeper energy layers. It's vital to know that we cleanse up to the point of chronic disease. If it's a spinal disease, we cleanse up to the 4th energy layer. For asthma, up to the 2nd energy layer. For small joint issues, up to the 3rd energy layer. Hypertension, also up to the 3rd energy layer. Hypertension is, indeed, an energy interruption. Energy does not go beyond the 3rd energy layer when one has hypertension. The energy accumulates in the superficial energy layers and doesn't move deeper. The same applies to severe skin diseases. It's an energy interruption. Initially, you should only cleanse up to 2 energy layers for about 6 months. Cleansing by using the energy of water, static exercises, dynamic exercises, and fasting. All these practices should be done to cleanse only 2 energy layers. Continue cleansing 2 energy layers until the skin improves, the primary disease recedes, and the person feels better. Then proceed to cleanse deeper energy layers. But if a person is healthy and only cleanses up to 3 energy layers after 6 months, there will be an imbalance. Deeper energy layers will be afflicted because one cleanses the initial energy layers but doesn't want to continue to cleanse deeper layers. This approach is also risky. To learn more on the subject of health and healing of the body, please make sure to read my health guide, available for download on my YouTube channel or on my Instagram page. Thank you very much, and see you soon.